Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oladele Ayorinde. I'm happy to welcome you back to the Organ House concert and seminar series today. Today is a new day, but before my brief introduction or introducing of our guests for today, I'd like to remind you that the Organ House concert and seminar series is a space of artistic, scholarly, and business and critical space, for engaging ideas around music, music making, and people making music. For some of you who have been following the conversation in the last few months, we can say 1 year now, we have explored different ideas across genres, across personalities, and we have established different spheres of thinking, praxis, and we have also engaged people. Today, I am happy to welcome you again to this platform. We can now say is a community platform because we know on a weekly basis we have you. Thank you for joining us. So the Organ House, like you know, we have three project series going on together. The first one is the documentation project, which is about the Organ House documentation and digitization project on the one hand. We also have the Organ House artificial AI music dialogue, of course. Then what we are running for this particular contest, this presentation falls into the new or recently launched series, which is the African music series. So by that, I'm happy to welcome you to this series again. And today is definitely going to be an engaging moment, an insightful moment, and a moment also of reflection on some of the conversations we've had, particularly in the last 1 year. Some of you know what I'm talking about, but I am not going to open it. I'm going to leave it to our presenter today to unveil the dynamic of today. So by that, our guest today is no other person than Dr. Kayode Samuel. Dr. Kayode Samuel, it's nice having you today. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us today. How are you today?
I'm very fine. Thank you very much, sir, for inviting me. I'm grateful to you for extending this invitation to me. And
you are welcome, sir. So by introduction, I'd like to briefly introduce Dr. Kayode Samuel to some of us who, by chance, by one way or the other, you know him as a professor, as a teacher, as a pianist. I'm sure you know him across, depending on your own terms of recognition with him or relationship with him. But I still like to introduce him, particularly, within the context of this presentation to some of us who, needs to know the context we are dealing with and the personality that we are engaging today. Kayode Samuel is a musicologist and music artist, art educator. He received his professional training in music from the Polytechnic of Ibadan and Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, and the University of Ibadan. He was principal lecturer in the Department of Music at St. Andrew's College, later Emmanuel Alayande College of Education, Oyo State, Nigeria. This is until 2010, when he joined the service of the University of Ibadan. Presently, he is an associate professor and head of African Musicological Unit at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ibadan, as well as an associate lecturer in the Department of Music at the University of Ibadan. Dr. Kayode Samuel's research interests include theory, practice, pedagogy, and a pedagogy of the music arts, including indigenous and modern African music traditions, and criticism through cultural, sensitive, and appropriate interventions, as well as music and gender-related issues. Many of the outputs of these studies have been published in referred scholarly journals, as well as chapters contribution in books, both regionally and internationally. To his credit, Dr. Kayode has over 50 publications to his credit, and I think that's huge. As a distinguished, he is a distinguished recipient of the postdoctoral fellowship of the African Humanities Program, AHP, which is awarded by the American Council of Learned Society. This is between 2013 to 2014. Dr. Kayode Samuel is a member of numerous professional bodies, both nationally and internationally. This body include Indigenous Knowledge Study IKS group at the University of Ibadan, an Association of Nigerian Musicologists, ANIM, here in Nigeria, and Society of Music Educators of Nigeria, SOMEN, also here in Nigeria, as well as Pan-African Society for Musical Arts Education, PASME, which is an international body located in Africa's Face, and International Society for Education, ISME, which is, I think, is the biggest body of music education educators in the world today. But the Kayode Samuel is happily married to Professor Folake Samuel, a community nutritionist, and their union is blessed with two lovely children, Ayo Oluwa Tomiwa and Mofiyin Fun Oluwa. Thank you. Thank you so much. So today, as mentioned earlier, is quite an interesting moment today to have Dr. Kayode Samuel today with us. And without wasting much time, please join me as I welcome Dr. Kayode Samuel to present his work and his talk to us today. Thank you so much. Dr. Kayode, the podium is yours.
All right. Thank you very much once again for inviting me. And I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity. I'm trying to share my screen. I hope you can all see it.
Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you. All right, the topic I have decided to talk about actually is for me I just wanted us to have a discussion. It's not well, it might qualify as an academic paper in a way, but I am just asking us to reflect and see what practical steps we can take to address when we discuss issues. I'm more interested in the solutions so that it's not just identifying issues or problems, but how do we forge ahead? So I've decided to look at this topic, deodorizing or transforming artistic relics, exploring the African indigenous musical arts in Nigeria's tertiary institutions. And well, the abstract is, I'm sure we've already followed from the invites. So by way of introduction, I'd like to say discursive engagements on the uniqueness of African indigenous knowledge systems as one of the practical responses to the wake-up call for Africa to look inward in search of the truly African sensitive solutions to address a myriad of our challenges in the world that is changing with bewildering speed have soared over time. And you also agree with me that critical scholarly conversations about the prospects and the benefits of integrating indigenous knowledge systems, which we often call IKS, into Africa's educational program have also reached a crescendo in recent times. And one of the pointers is the fact that in the area of music specifically, it resulted in the birth of what is known as the Pan-African Society for Musical Arts Education at the beginning of this century. And I like to say that PASME offered numerous platforms for generating and exploring useful ideas towards trying to improve the state of affairs with regards to music education in all spheres as far as Africa is concerned. Now, I'd like to just start by just reminding us what we call indigenous knowledge systems, just to rehash it. We know that indigenous knowledge system is a complex set of knowledge that is born out of the worldview, that is either the philosophy or the ways of life of indigenous communities. And it is passed down over generations. Such knowledge includes, skills, acquisition, expertise, which are primarily homegrown. So the first word that is this homegrown, it is not borrowed and not foreign derived. It's evolved from the people, among the people, how they give meaning to their world. What's their worldview? How do they interpret the kind of knowledge that are risen among them? And of course, all of these are, we'll see how we'll tie all of them together as we move on. Two, it is system-based. It is not a single independent, disjointed elements. So you see this system as intricately woven together, comprising what I would describe as cells, tissues, ligaments, organs, all of them working together for active functioning and for projection of whatever they have to present to the world that they have. And because it is system-based, like any system, it can collapse. So you can experience what we call systemic failure. So let's make that. Thirdly, it is cultural. It is rooted in the culture and traditions, as well as the experiences of the people. So because it's homegrown, it is from the culture of the people. And so by nature, it's going to be dynamic. We'll see as we move on. It is all embracing. In terms of when you look at the technology, it may move from simple to compound to complex, but it's about the people. So the tools with which they work, materials with which, whether they are concrete or not, but technologies that is deployed, you see a reflection of that. The educational system is also there. Issue of science, how do they give meaning and interpret, in a systematic form that you can understand and follow details of what in such a way that it brings understanding to people, and you can explain them using different frames. It is social. It is about politics. It's about the religion of people. It's about the arts. It's about language. It's about values. That's why I say it's all embracing. It reflects the totality in terms of the ecological, agricultural, medical, social, artistic sectors. It covers everything. And that's how they make meaning to whatever they do. And so you don't really need to preach to us in Africa issue about climate change with from the dateless past, right from the roots. People have deployed, they have the understanding of how to preserve the environment. That's why sometimes you have places designated as, forests, but they put them as sacred forests. The element of sacredness is just to ensure that people do not go to explore there. And it's a way of preserving the community and the ecosystem. It recognizes the fact that man is part of the entire ecosystem. And so they try to ensure that as much as possible as they explore, as they improve their lives, they are conscious of sustainability so that they do not jeopardize the interests of the coming generation. And so by way of definition, you see that IKS covers different strands like I've pointed out to us. Now let us look at the attributes of IKS. It is holistic in approach, and I would say it's intact. Both the natural and supernatural, the physical and the spiritual are combined. And like I said, there's very, very little room for compartmentalization. as commonly found in Western epistemological system. And that's why usually we use the notion, some of us have subscribed to the notion of musical arts, because it talks about the intricate connection of not just the sonic experience. Sound is connected to dance. Dance is linked in drama. Drama is expressed in poetry. Poetry is also accentuated or projected through, costumes. So you see a kind of connection where, for instance, the Yoruba Egungun Festival music, well, what's called Egungun Music Festival, the embodiments, there's a social interaction between the divine, or what you call the celestial and the terrestrial. So there's a kind of synergy, there's a kind of connection and working between Ara Ọ̀run and Ara Ayé, and that's what the Egungun symbolizes. But the costume is within the visual arts components. You see the music, which it could be dance and drumming and singing. Then also, of course, they are accompanied with drumming, and there's the dancing and the kind of interactions that go on between the Egungun and the members of the society is actually dramatic spectacles in the end. So you see a connection of all of this. All of these are embodied and expressed. So you see it is holistic in approach, it is intact, and it is not that compartmentalized as it were. It allows for sustainability. It is self-sustaining, and it has survived several decades of onslaughts. Its evolution is intergenerational, allowing for balance, harmony, and nature. Of course, largely it is oral tradition, it is orally based, and it is through rote learning, storytelling, rituals, and ceremonies geared towards preserving cultural values and practices. It is community-based. It is collectively owned by the people. They share it within the community, and they are closely tied to social roles, with elders acting as custodians who are holding all of this in trust so that they could disseminate and enculturate the coming generation. It is adaptable. Its adaptability, it shows its dynamic nature. And so its evolution is characterized by continuous experiments, observation, and therefore it is also responsive to change. When you look at the biodiversity component of it, I've spoken about this issue of conservation. It possesses a good understanding of the ecosystem for conservation and management. And most importantly, it is valuable. Firm interest in preserving the gains or reversing losses and ensuring effective solutions as we move along. So these are some of the attributes of African Indigenous Knowledge System. And I like to just draw example with among the Yorubas. When you look at this, like I said, this knowledge, there are production agencies who are responsible, this kind of knowledge is warehoused with specified or specialized production agencies. And we have them, they are responsible for socialization processes, the oral communication, diagnostic apparatuses, and which include, but not limited to, the Ifa corpus, Owe, the proverbs, Ashamon, the folk tales, the folk songs, family lineages, and professional guilds. These are components, they are agencies that are responsible for transmitting, for generating, transmitting, and ensuring that the knowledge is properly propagated. And I'd like to just briefly discuss IK utilization using examples from the musical arts as the springboard. You would discover closely and I will be sharing some of this experience from ensembles that you find, traditional music ensemble. You'll find the structured, systematic, and effective presentation, though it might look as if it is non-formal, but sometimes one could even argue that it is formal. Now, but it's not done within the four walls of the schools, as you normally will find in the Western system. But the knowledge transmission is such that it is structured. And permit me to use the example of Dundun Ensemble. A child that is born into that family is enculturated. How do you do that? From childhood, the father will buy, we make kanago for the child, and he begins to play around. And that's all. He does that, number one, to begin to develop muscles and ensure that supple wrist is actually gained. And as he moves at the time the parents or the master musician feels that this child is knowledgeable again, can move to the next level, could be asked to become atelier. And so where he begins to receive instructions on how to follow. So the process of socialization and intricate way of inculturating this child into the society to begin to understand the way the society functions, while you begin to understand your roles within the society, is also presented. And so the child moves from that either to gudu-gudu, and is to further develop the supple wrist. Also, the mental cognitive domain is also being developed at this point. And at certain points, intervals, when they have considered that this child is knowledgeable enough, is allowed to graduate to the next level. And that's how it goes round, up the ladder. And that's why there's a common saying that agba ẹni tó fàgbà lágbà kọ́ dùndún, ó ṣeé ṣe kó jẹ́ pé gúdúgúdú ni ó sàn tí ó fi darúgbó. Because it's better to learn this when you are a child. So the point I'm making is that it is structured, it is systematic and effective, even though it could be non-formal. The three domains of learning are well covered. So when I talk about the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor, all of them are enriched and they are catered for. Now, like I said, while the child is playing, it could be kon kolo, is developing the mental capability of the child in terms of spacing and understanding the sequence of events to gain traction and understand. It develops the mental faculty of the child so that the child does not miss the steps, because as the bell rhythm keeper, he understands the enormous responsibility that is also placed on him. And so his mental faculty is being developed to understand how rhythms work. Secondly, when you look at the fact that as a social activity, music, roles that are assigned, you need to work within a team. And so the child begins to understand what interdependency means, what it means for people to lay responsibility at your doorstep and for you to know exactly how to respond, play your role. And that's why occasionally when they miss it, there are punishments, and when they get it, there are rewards. And so this way, the child also begins to have that sense of belongingness, and he or she considers himself as part and parcel of the society. This is the way gradually roles are assigned. Even the gender roles are also clearly marked, whether it is omeleako, omeleabo, yalu, all of this, the gendering within the structure of instruments, they are also well pronounced. And of course, because of activities of playing the drum, and the psychomotor is well developed. So it caters for all the three domains of learning, they are well covered. As sources, they are also well preserved through established institutions. And that's why, to a large extent, you want to preserve this knowledge. It's not just left open. That's why sometimes they established, cults, so that the knowledge is safeguarded and you preserve it. And if this knowledge must be revealed to you or given to you in large quantity, then you are initiated into that cult. And once you are initiated, you also have that, you develop that responsibility to have the high level of the knowledge that you cannot just deploy anyhow. And so there's also room for check and balances within all of this. And that's why those structures are there. There's synergy in, theory and praxis. And like I gave the examples of the drum ensemble. The principles governing either the family setting is well entrenched. The roles and values, issue of hierarchy, relationship, power, power relations, philosophies, all of these are embedded within the African Indigenous Knowledge System. And finally, I also want to say that it is self-propagating and self-regulating. There are inherently, values that are pitched within the whole system, so that the peer review mechanism is also well packaged there. And there are ways by which you check abuse of power. There are ways by which, when you need to dispense or share the knowledge, the responsibility within you is also there. So there's a way it self-regulates itself. And I don't know how many of us have watched Tunde Kilani's film, that's Thunderbolts. I'd like to just illustrate that, use the example in that particular movie, written by Akinwumi Ishola. There was this copper, this lady that was laced with a magnum, that's Thunderbolts. The husband, suspected her of, maybe being sexually active, and perhaps accused her within his heart. It's not really a direct accusation. And then thought he wanted to prevent her from becoming promiscuous. And so laced her with magu. Now, at the time the diagnosis was done by a babalawo and treatment began, there were 2 other babalawos that were invited. And while they also worked, they checked, they saw that the principal babalawo had done a great job. They said, look, yeah, your work is at advanced stage. However, I would like to recommend that you add this and this other herbs, and then the man said, we will do that. What else do you understand about peer review mechanism if we are saying African Indigenous knowledge does not have such things? So, but let me move on to the issue of contestation. I've dealt with all of this, so it varies from context to context, and they are designed to satisfy people's needs. And where they are derived from people's needs and experiences, they also speak to the people's existence and portray and define their identity by and large. Now, but there is a contestation between the 2 legacies that we've had, a serious contestation between 2 legacies. There is the foreign invasion and theft of Africa's cultural heritage. I'm sure, I don't need to sound more of this. On the one hand, African Indigenous knowledge as our heritage and indomitable legacy for long has attracted and continues to attract attention of outside observers. They became so motivated to the point that they have illegally acquired products, which are artifacts of the knowledge. Many of these products are kept locked up in foreign museums for exhibitions, and the result is that we have a monumental, irreparable losses to the continent of Africa. That's one. On the other hand, the colonialists, through their administrative and, I dare say, religious agencies, have bequeathed a completely different system, which has subdued the original African Indigenous knowledge to the extent that the former, that is the Western form of knowledge, is now preferred and in fact referred to as the original or the orthodox, while the original, which is what belongs to us, have now been designated as alternative. When you look at medicine, they say the Western medical practice is orthodox medicine, whereas when to practice African medicine now is referred to as the alternative. That's a big, I don't know, that's a big contradiction. This is not only in the field of medicine. The political institutions have been reversed. You know the issue of monarchy, kingship that we have is replaced with democracy that we have imported from other places. But also in our own field, music and music education, where the Western music is privileged over and above African music, not only in terms of content, the process, the pedagogy, and indeed the products. And so it is when a performance is done and you're able to perform Handel's music, the people so-called the masters, and which are Western pieces, that is when you have performed standard music. But to perform a urebe or any other indigenous music, you are considered to be backward. And so to a large extent, we see that there is an existential threat to Africa's indigenous knowledge. And so modernity, globalization, and ideas say overexploitation of the environment that is fueled by the consumerist orientation is really to blame for this. And we seem to have crossed the Rubicon. And because when you look at the evidence, there is the indiscriminate sale of sacred sites, irreversible damage to the environment due to oil exploration, and there is no gainsaying that at present we are witnessing another wave of colonial invasion, which is self-destructive. The mission that is, you can see obviously from repressive religious movements and an increase in the loss of our humanity. And this is this calls for a concern. And if we have to travel the historical lane, we'll discover that there was an era of cultural awakening, which preceded the rupture of the colonial hegemony that is occasioned by all the post-colonial need for reinstating Africa's legacy. And at that time, attempts were made to bridge the gap between the old and the new order, so that we begin to forge a dynamic process. And this saw the coming of the pro-democratic movements. So as represented by the Pan-Africanist movement at that period, the Nkrumahs, the Nyereres, the Awolowos, the Zik, and all over, we saw that there was a great awakening. Now, it became obvious that to ensure that the nascent political independence became firmly rooted, it must be complemented by and must exhibit cultural freedom, so that independent member states will begin to complement what they have received, and they could assert their African presence in all spheres so that they can uphold the best in culture, including music. So to this extent, social arrangements in traditional communities provided the required space to cultivate musical arts and ensure continuity through enculturation at various stages of life of individuals and societies. And you will recall the first World Festival of Negro Arts was held in Dakar, Senegal in 1966, which was shortly after independence, while Nigeria hosted the second edition, popularly known as the Festac 1977. Both of these expressions, they represented the celebration of African and African diaspora culture, our arts and our heritage, marking the projection and application of IKS and its creative features. And as I move along, you will see that there were actually musicologists who were concerned, who had this Pan-African spirit to push it. That forced some of them, or let me say, not forced them. I think it motivated them to go and learn learn the arts and the basic, and even became experts in traditional music. And notable examples would be Mekinzewi, who had to learn the essay drum, that's tonro, to understand how the workings of the traditional instrument. And he learned this from an unlettered, a non-literate master musician. The same with Joshua Uzoigwe. And so what are the implications of all of this? We saw that there was built bridging strategies for integration and institutionalization of what we have. And it's against this backdrop, it became evident that we should recognize and demonstrate the integrity of African traditions, as well as the creative exploration of the potentials of cultural alternatives inherent in the diversity which African traditions offer in contemporary context. So the elements, like I said, will serve as building strategies so that we can integrate and institutionalize them in our higher institutions of learning, specifically relating them to music, which is our own area of focus. And so my question really now is, are African artistic materials really dead? Are they deodorized relics? Do they have any value? Are they completely dead? Should they be conditioned to, forgetfulness, field of forgetfulness, or sea of forgetfulness? Critics have queried the relevance of these materials. So the age-long philosophical strands of African Indigenous Knowledge System have queried their relevance to contemporary situations, especially aspects which tend to promote negative tendencies, those ones shrouded in secrecy or mystified. In extreme cases, we see that some even have attempted to trash them for being overrated, deodorized fossils, whose values are nothing but glamorized entities. Some of them even question why traditional forms should be reproduced and reenacted in their original forms. As far as these critics are concerned, we must allow the sleeping dog lie, because these are dead traditions, and there's no reason for us to go and invoke them and bring them back. Particularly, they cite examples of the standardization challenge, which, especially when we talk about the technology, instrumental technology endeavors, the standardization challenge is also a strong voice against looking into the rear mirror. And so these are challenges of inadequate information on perhaps what should be the uniform scale for somebody who's trying to make dundun. Why is it that the dundun drum that is made in Ede is different from the one that is made in Oshogbo, and does not even sound close to the one that is made in Oyo? They will cite those examples as why we should not even talk about that, because the Europeans have standardized their instruments, and so we even have this endeavor to begin to work towards standardization of and unification of our own traditional instruments. There's also perceived inconsistencies and incongruity in notational systems. We have not even been able to agree on what should be a particular system of notation that will be acceptable, that we can actually present to the world. Everyone is trying to experiment one way or the other. And so indeed, the prospect of the inherent resources of IKS and the values that their products hold do not carry much weight for the antagonists of the African Indigenous Knowledge System. So my question is this: are these claims justified? Are they justifiable? As far as I know, the Western Europe and the Americas, and also other what we call the more technologically advanced continents or countries, they look up to, which we look up to as shining examples, though they keep pushing the boundaries. They have also not relegated their own classical arts and values. They've never relegated them to the background. So they still project them. They are their cultural values. After all, one notable example is invention of aircrafts. We call it aircraft, and it's a form of crafts. So why do we castigate witchcrafts when both of them are crafts, which should help us to fly? And so on one hand, you have the aircraft. It has the ability to fly and carry people along, and will not succumb to the law of gravity as long as the engines are working perfectly. If it's in good order, it works perfectly, and it will fly, go to wherever it chooses. But when it comes to our own native, native land or indigenous crafts, which is also a form of flying. As you see, they are labeled as witches, and so they connote negative things. So my question is, are they not both flying? Are they not meant to fly? They are a form of craft, one way or the other. And so, so when we now move on to look at musical art education in Nigeria's tertiary institution, I'm saying we need to mind map the present state of affairs. And first thing you will see when we do this is that there is a disappearance of African musical artistic components from the menu. It is already relegated to the background. It's not just the lopsidedness of the curricula that we are talking about, where the philosophy, the contents, the pedagogical approaches are largely Western. If you pick the curriculum of, is it NCE at College of Education, Polytechnic, or even university, you check it out, there is prominence given to Western music at the detriment of African music. Now you ask, who is to blame? Because colleagues are the ones who are also experts, so-called experts, who will also recommend what should be in the curriculum. We've had opportunity to revise and ensure a proper review, but how much of these gains can we sustain? So it's one of the questions that I am calling attention to. There's also the human capital deficit. And you will see this evidence in inadequate manpower, not only in terms of number of persons that should, be able to teach African music, but I dare say also in terms of the competence. And if you permit me to share some experiences, when I was studying at the Polytechnic Ibadan, those who also went to Poly with me, we remember Mr. B.C. Adeleke. He was an instructor in traditional instruments. I'm not sure he had more than maybe even first living certificates. So it's not about having a degree, or he wasn't a qualified music degree holder, but he was quite versatile. He had that, the versatility on instruments was exceptional. And he taught us those rudiments. He was a demonstrator, or maybe what we call an instructor. He didn't have, he wasn't one of the lecturers, but we received tutelage from him, and he was able to teach us components of practical, he exposed us to practical African traditional instruments performance, which greatly helped us. And when I went to Ife also, there was also Baba Defisan. Not young, was quite old, elderly person, not tall. He was also there to play, and he could do several instruments. Those people were on the payroll of the universities. They were attached to the Department of Music. They were professionals who provided the kind of human capital to ensure that we receive the kind of training. But today, how many departments of music have such kind of persons on the as faculty members, even as demonstrators or instructors? And I think the answer is blowing in the wind. And so when we look, we see that there's a need for us to rethink the dynamics of the music training resources. The ingenuity of the master music practitioners in adopting traditional resource materials to craft their musical arts, and their contextual appropriateness was fascinating. And I like to say that reality in our institutions today, institution of learning today, however, show that there is a decline in performance dexterity and less opportunities for knowledge and skill acquisition on resource materials, as well as the lowering of required discipline that is required, the discipline level that is required, and diligence for distinctiveness in performance situation. And to a large extent, you say that there has been a radical shift from the normative music training and assessment holistically. You cannot give what you don't have. And so that's exactly, you might have all the degrees, have a PhD in African music, yet you are unable to even play play any musical instrument, traditional musical instruments, and yet you are called the experts. You are called to, you are designed and labeled as the experts in the field. I don't know what kind of expertise that is conveying or something. So there is hostility to music on the part of policymakers and administrators. And we see also poor attitude to the components of African music by the instructors of music and self. And of course, the students themselves cannot be spared from this. There's a lack of synergy among different stakeholders of musical arts education. And so we need to call to attention all of this, besides the insufficient avenues and materials for integrating indigenous knowledge in the sector. And so as we look on what are the practical solutions, I want to say, number one, we need to have a change in the mindset from that stagnancy to an accept first that transformation is possible. It's a possibility, and we need to start from that. So when we begin to have a change in our mindset, and we begin to embrace, have this positive mindset that African indigenous knowledge is not inferior, it is not secondary, it should go pari passu, it should stand on the same pedestal with Western musical experiences, and as we propagate them. That's the way to balance the whole equation. There's also need for us to embrace new technologies. So I'm not advocating that we we'll continue to use the old technologies in deploying or the traditional forms of technology because there is advancement. The world is changing. But the good thing about the indigenous knowledge system in Africa is that it is also dynamic. It is subject to change. For instance, issue of storytelling has moved from sitting children down and telling them story, to digital storytelling. And this is a way of complementing the traditional form. And we have all sorts of things. There are improvements in technologies to help and ensure that production of instrumental technology becomes better. It becomes faster and more effective, and we are more efficient in handling them. Then we need to wage a relentless war against what I call the evil twin culture of indolence and consumerism. There are two of these, they are intricately, they are like a conjoined twin. Indolence is something that no one should allow to continue to, to dominate or have its presence in the department of music, wherever you have. And this, this notion, this appetite to just consume. And you see, the issue of consuming is that when you consume, the next thing is you are going to excrete it. You are just going to dispose it off. And so it does not have add any value that is sustainable. So there's a need to retool the agencies and position them for the onerous task that we have ahead. And we need to retrain, that's the word, train and retrain facilitators. And of course, I encourage, see how we could push for employment, and appointment of non-literate experts to address the competence deficits that we have within that system. And of course, there should be a constant critical engagement with all stakeholders. The gown must leave the ivory tower and synergize with the town. I'm sure Dr. Oluranti will also share his own experience. Your understanding and your experience as a composer before you left the shores of Nigeria. People enjoyed your music. A lot of choirs performed your music. They looked forward to it. Excellent performance. But you saw that when you left the shores, after you received your training, there was something that became radically different. When you came to Iragbiji and had your training, you had a stopover with an engagement with traditional musicians. There were a lot of things you took away from them. That formed the basis of, to strengthen the theory and understanding of the composition. And so you're able to use all of this. Of course, that was the same framework that Akiyuba used, the same framework that Fela Showande used. All of them were involved in deep, serious research of the traditional music they understood it, and then that's why they were now able to transform. You see, they did not just package it and use those materials the way they were. Joshua Izegwe studied clearly, the Dundun ensemble of the Yoruba, and was able to write one of the movements of talking drum was inspired by, or let me say, was framed from the Dundun ensemble, and also some other ones, which he called talking drums. And these are conceptually derived, they are derivative of indigenous knowledge system. And those are ways that they were able to transform all of this. So there's a need for critical engagement within, the different stakeholders as we move on. Like I said, my intention is just to bring up this for this discussion and that we can move forward. I don't have all the answers, but I think I've raised enough questions for us to also move ahead. Let me appreciate and thank the organizers of this forum, the Organ House Concert and Seminar Series, for making this platform available for constant dialogue on such an important issue as this. And this is one of those things we need to promote. That this dialogue, this constant engagement between town and gown, that synergy must be encouraged to continue. And so, my concluding thoughts, I like to say, when the dross is purified, the inherent beauty of gold or precious stones will be revealed. A clogged pipe must be cleaned up and well lubricated. As we remove the friction, we'll be able to ensure fluidity. We'll be able to get things done. Permit me, because I also talk about the fact that many of this knowledge are expressed and presented, and they are not just expressed, they are also propagated through Owe. The Yorubas will say, "Teni, teni, tekisan tatan. Bonigba ba ṣe pé gbá ẹ̀ la ṣe bá pé. Nání nání nání, ohun tá a ní là á nání, aṣẹ́gità máa nání èpo gini. Ọmọ ẹni kì í ṣèdí bẹ̀bẹ̀ rẹ̀, ká fi ìlẹ̀kẹ̀ sídìí ọmọ ẹlòmíì." I mean, these are well entrenched, philosophical saying, and they talk about why we need to cherish our indigenous, our heritage, our values. We need to preserve them, we need to use them, we need to move on. And so, on the final note, Africa's vintage indigenous knowledge system, although may appear latent and less appreciated, also its resources remain largely untapped and could be misconstrued as fossilized elements, which ought to be discarded instead of being called back from the dead or deodorized, as some may want to say. I like to submit that it is incorruptibly invaluable. We can only properly understand and appreciate the present curve when the contours and lines are redrawn. Thank you very much for listening. I will look forward to our engagement. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kayode Samuel. This is quite fascinating, deep, and thought-provoking, as they say. As you, through your last point, teni, takisan taton. Then the last one, ọmọ ẹni kì í ṣèdí bẹ̀bẹ̀rẹ̀, ká filẹ̀kẹ̀ sídìí ọmọ ẹlòmíì. Thank you so much. That is quite interesting. Yeah, but I find this very, very interesting and also very challenging. As you put it in the beginning, this is like a call to order, like a call to order. Let's come together, let's reason together. And as mentioned at the beginning of this particular presentation to our friends, that this conversation has been on this platform. And I'm happy when Dr. Kayode Samuel started digging into some of the initial conversation, and the ideas that, have been explored, and also bringing new ideas, in a more nuanced way, trying to, situate them, and also, while also problematizing these ideas. Thank you so much, Dr. Kayode Samuel. So I think what I found very interesting here, three important things. The first one is the features of what we call the African Indigenous Knowledge System in music study. What are these features? And what I find very interesting about the features is the fact that, according to Dr. Kayode Samuel, it is holistic. And to borrow a term from the Cameroonian anthropologist Francis Inyamjo, it is incomplete in its existence. It strives on borrowing. It is, it is open for amendment, transformation. It borrows. So it is not strict, because when people think about indigenous system, people think about, oh, those pre-colonial ideas, those things far away, those fetish things. And through this presentation, we've been able to see, ways in which this particular culture, this idea is not belated. I think that's the word. It's not a belated phenomenon. It is now. It is now. It's what we do now. It's tomorrow. And the other point I also found very, very interesting and intriguing and engaging in this presentation is the idea around indigenous system, as a resource, not only for our ideas of indigenous culture, but also as a form of technology, means to an end, ways in which even people, the Africans, we Nigerians, either you are Yoruba, either you are Hausa or Igbo, you can draw from these resources on a daily basis. So we can say it is there it speaks to everyday life. Indigenous system is a way of knowing. And from what he said, from this particular point, I remember one of the conversations we had here with Dr. What's his name? Tunde Adegbola. Tunde Adegbola, who says proverbs are means to an end. They are like technology. They are theories. This is exactly what Dr. Kayode Samuel has explained to us through indigenous music philosophies and indigenous music system, even culture generally. And the last one about indigenous IKS is simply that the idea, the term itself is all encompassing, in the sense that indigenous knowledge system is a sphere of life, is a cosmology where every forms of life, technology, marriage, upbringing, education, whatever you call it, artistic principles are all encompassing, and they function together as a whole. So when you talk about music, you can talk about technology, you talk about ritual, you talk about religion, you talk about worshiping God, you talk about everything. When you go to technology, you can also talk about music. So I find that very, 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 propelling and very, very interesting and intriguing today. Thank you so much. Thank you. However, I have a few questions, and also by extension and in some, you also raised some important questions around, problematizing even the idea of IKS itself, in the sense that how do we propagate, and how, as people, the ways in which people understood, this IKS territory and spheres of life. Of course, I need to open this to our friends and colleagues, to see, to also, to contribute. I'm sure some of them have questions they want to follow up, and they also have layers of ideas they want to contribute, because the presentation itself, as you have explained, is not just about giving, it's about collective reasoning together. Thank you so much again, Dr. Kayode Samuel. Thank you, thank you. This is fascinating. Thank you. Yeah. So, friends and colleagues, we are at that point again this week where we need you, where we are calling upon you. I'm sure many of us already you are raising your hand. So if you have any question, if you have any point, if you have any contribution, you are welcome. You are welcome to do so. So just raise your hand and tell us, what you want to say. I'll be happy to call you and invite you to, to use the mic to do, to make a contribution. Thank you so much. Okay, we have Dr. Okpeyemi Adeyinka. Can we have you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Thank you
afternoon.
very much. I sincerely want to thank Dr. Samuel for that thought-provoking and incisive delivery. I want to say this, that IKS, if not, beyond the level of formal education, should be at par with what we call formal education. And why do I say that? There are people who are literate and who are not knowledgeable. And there are knowledgeable people who are at the same time literate. Most of these people, the old folks who never attended school, had some indigenous knowledge imbued in them. And these are actually helped them to navigate life. I was raised in an environment, where my father taught Ifa, back in his days in the university and at the college. And anytime he speaks, he would usually lace it with a proverb. And some of those things, when I try to compare some of those things that we usually hear, and you find them even in the Bible. You hear things like, and the Bible says, if the foundation, I see the similitude in there. And there are so many of such. I've compared notes with my father-in-law on these issues before. That's, well, the Yorubas will say this, and the Bible says this. That I can see the relationship. So going back, I think it is our duty to ensure that this does not become an endangered thing, although it's becoming a very serious thing. I remember when my mother was an English teacher, but when she wanted to teach us how to read, she didn't teach us ABC, she taught us ABD. And because of that, we had the very good understanding of the, both words, the Yoruba language and English language. However, I don't want to say I want to disagree with Dr. Samuel on the witchcraft and the witchcraft and the aircraft phenomenon, because he was even laughing when he was saying that. The question I would rather ask is, to what end is one? What do Africans use our own crafts to do? I wouldn't know if that should be a question that should actually raise, but the end to which we use, our own crafts, that is called witchcraft. What those who practice that, what they use it for, and what the other one, what they use it for, should be a thing or should be a thing of concern. I want to thank Organ House again for this wonderful series, and again to Dr. Samuel. God bless you. Thank you, sir.
Amen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Kayode, you might want to, in case you want to respond to that quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I think, thank you for Dr. Okoyemi Adeyinka for your contributions. I mean, we are on the same page when it comes to issue of not just saying it should be at par. It should form the bedrock, such that what you get from outside should now be part of the building blocks to build your house. But in a house where, in raising our children, some of us don't even want to speak your own native language. None of you must speak vernacular. It starts from there. So you spoke about issue of language for teaching. How many of us speak our native tongue to our children? I think that should be the first place to start. But then secondly, you need to possess, and you must have what you want to give. You cannot give what you don't have. Now, but because many of us have been socialized into, I won't say, we've developed this appetite for anything Western at the detriment of anything that is African, so to speak. We've relegated that to the background. It becomes highly, terrible for us.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Are you with me?
Yes, definitely.
Hello?
Definitely.
Okay, let me just conclude. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes, definitely. I
Okay.
can hear you.
So what do Africans use their craft for? Well, unfortunately, I'm not a member of those in those cults, so I may not be able to tell you. But from little that we've read, we even talk of Aje Funfun, Aje Dudu, and all of. So as far as I know, every culture has both malevolent and benevolent forces. And so we cannot just dismiss and say anything that comes from our craft must be negative. No, I don't think that is correct. We use some of these things to diagnose. Some have those kind of knowledge which are, even issues that cannot be diagnosed using Western medicine. You cannot screen or X-ray or get any image, and somebody tells you is still experiencing a particular forces. Now, if you believe that the name of Jesus can drive away forces, evil forces, then why do we also think it does not exist in this other one? So I think the debate is neither here nor there. But I just believe the issue of crafts, before we have our smartphones where we are aided by to have what you call video calls, video conferencing and all of that. Sometimes you can call people's being and then their face will appear to you and then you can have conversations with them. Or somebody who's far away, there are ways you could send messages to them that are not really material in such a way. They are also spiritually discerned. And that's why we talk about the IKS. It has its own spiritual component. It has its own physical components. But I thank you for that. The last point I really want to speak about the unlettered being resource person or being quite resourceful. And that's why we make a distinction between moka and eko. The fact that you are literate simply means, and you've used the right word, literacy is just a form of knowledge. It's not all embracing. It's just a component of knowledge, which is the ability to read and write. And so that's why if somebody is a professor, he has all the knowledge, in his area of, he has become so much big and people look up to the person as authority, but lacks simple etiquette, does not know how to respect the elders. They say, that's the way the person is described. So they clearly distinguish between eko and Kenya moka. So I think I agree with you very much on that. We have a mason, that's a bricklayer, Baba Beji. Oh, I'm sure he does not have more than primary 6. Even when he writes something for you, you will read in between the lines to understand. But the kind of knowledge that he possesses, not just in his arts, but even to contribute, is so philosophical. And I wonder, my wife and I always wonder, we have PhD, both of us have PhD, but the depth of knowledge and analysis, and those are expressed, it could be just 2 away that he will say, and it encapsulates everything. And these are the kind of knowledge that we think we need to add more and to what are the new ways of knowing that is, and they are ours. These are our, these are our heritage. We should promote them. Thank you very much for your contribution, Dr. Adeyinka.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kayode, for that wonderful, responses, and also thanks so much, Dr. Okweyemi. Shaolu, thank you so much. Yeah, we have to people who wants to ask questions. The first person, Mr. Kayode Adeola and Dr. Ayo Oluranti. Please, yes, I'm going to call you right now, but just a quick note for some of us who are joining us for the first time on this platform. This is Organhouse Concert and Seminar Series. For some of our events, please, you can follow us on YouTube. Just check the Chats platform. I just, pasted the YouTube link there. You can also search for us on X, Twitter. You can check us. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us also on Facebook. So you are welcome to follow us, and the videos, including this particular seminar, is going to definitely be uploaded. And we have layers of initial videos and recordings already on that platform. Please, you are welcome to follow us and join us and monitor the conversation. And okay, so let's come back to the platform. So can we have there's one Kayode Adeola, I'm sure. I don't know if Mr. or Mrs. Doctor or Professor, but can we have Kayode Adeola, please?
Dr. Kayode Adeola.
Oh, can we have Dr. Kayode Adeola, please?
Yes. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I just want to thank you very much for that wonderful presentation that you've given us. Much appreciated, Dr. Kayode Samuel. My contribution is on the issue of documentation and this professionalism of these unlettered people and how we can integrate them into the mainstream, knowing that they are well knowledgeable. It baffles me when somebody goes to Professor Wole Soyinka, for example, interview him, and based on what he got from Professor Wole Soyinka, he gets a PhD. Meanwhile, the professor or the person that was interviewed remained where he is. This calls for some ethical questions. All these professionals in their own field who had put in 20, 30 years of training, if we bring them, for example, into the university system, we gauge them using just their school cert or secondary school certificate to place them on salary. If you do that, I wonder how many of them will be able to survive based on whatever salary we're going to give them if we place them like that. So I am wondering how we can integrate these people into the system without rocking the boat. Because somebody with a PhD, I'm sure will not want the so-called unlettered to come and displace him in his place of work. And so the big question is, how do we integrate this old system that you have told us is working fine? The system is, perfect based on the ideology and the philosophy of the people. And of course, we shouldn't even throw these things away, because a river that forgets its source will dry. And probably that's the issue we are having now. We are forgetting our sources and we are drying up. And so how do we integrate these elements of the past with what we have in the present so that we can move forward? I was going to talk about the witchcraft thing you talked about, or refer you to the article, one of my articles on witchcraft, which you can get online, but you have dealt with that well. We have our own science that is also very, very, very potent. But because of modernization, we have thrown them away. If 50 years ago, we can call somebody inside the water and the face will appear, are we not much more advanced than this cell phone that we are having now, that we're saying we're in 4G, 3G, 5G? Have we not passed all that? But because of modernity, we tend to be throwing away what we have and looking for what we don't want. So I don't know how we can do this integration, maybe so that the past and the present can be integrated and we have a great African, system that will continue to work for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution. Yeah, well, for me, if it had worked in the past, it means it is still possible. And that's why I will have to return to the issue of who are the regulators, who are those who set standards for training and the kind of music program that we run at higher institutions level. They are our colleagues, our revered professors, who will recommend in terms of human resources, A, B, C, D are required. These are for qualified, who will be on the lecturership cadre. X, Y, Z will be required for instructor or demonstration cadre. So the requirements will not be based on school stats, on degrees that are acquired from universities. There are people who have just basic, just like I said, basic, sometimes primary 6, and there is room for them within the system. But you spoke about the fact that the salary or the emolument may not be sustainable. But I dare say that it's supposed to complement whatever they are doing. It does not stop them from also engaging as professional musicians in playing music or making music at their own free period. It's just that they will have to find time that they needed to respond or contribute to this. But because when I also taught at College of Education at Oyo, that was also not available. I didn't have such kind of luxury or access to a resource person. I had to bring in, you know him, Bodani. At a time, I invited him to come and handle like a kind of workshop for my students to train them. It was just 3 days, but we might say it's really nothing. But the fact that they had that experience, I'm sure it helped quite a number of them. And then also, when we talk about promotion guidelines, ability to play and perform musical instruments that are African, or even compose or perform traditional instruments should also form part of the criteria for promotion. But these are issues that, we will have to negotiate, we'll have to discuss seriously. And, but the question will be, it is the person that is invited as the expert. That's the word, expert, even though it could be an ignorant expert, as Meki would describe. But it's considered to be the expert, and it is whatever counsel or recommendations that is given that will be followed. So that's why we need to have this conversation, so that when we have this reorientation, we could see how we could improve. It's about complementing. We're not saying we should jettison Western music. That's not the conversation. It's how do we mediate? How do we ensure that our own music, the traditional music, also stand on the same pedestal with the kind of training we have? So I believe it is doable, but we just need to look at the structure and see how we can bring in such personnel to work with us and achieve that particular goal. It could even be on part-time basis, but the fact that they are non-existent, for me, it's actually out of place. Thank you very much. By the way, that's Dr. Adeola is my childhood friend. We started junior choir together. We sang in the same choir. So thank you so much. He's also an associate professor in the Department of Religious Studies, University of Abuja. Thank you. Thank you very much for your thoughts and your contribution.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kayode Adeola, and particularly for your questions. They are quite intriguing, and they are part of this call to order also. And thanks, Dr. Kayode, for the response. So I think we have Dr. Ayorinde here. Can we have you, sir?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof, for this delivery, which is always Bangkok, which is your trademark anyway. Thank you so much. Now, I mean, you said that you really want us to discuss, and there's something that it's troubling for me. I keep thinking about these things, the problems we have in Africa, especially with music. In 2014, there was an international conference on arts, culture, heritage, and national development plan, vision for 2030. This was in 2014. And the conference theme this was in South Africa at Tshwane University. And the conference theme was strategic repositioning of arts, culture, and heritage in the 21st century. And there was this big talk. Everybody was talking about IKS. And that it's the way to go. We know that, I mean, South Africa, they tried. I mean, that's one of the things I picked from there. These people that we are talking about, they call them village professors, and they integrate them into academia. But the issue is this. That was in 2014, we're in 2025 now. That talk too, we've been hearing it about how important IKS is. For us as music practitioners, we've been saying it, and it's not happening. That's the truth. Nani untabani nani nani kankan. We keep moving, we keep, responding to the dynamics of the bigger powers, the West, which brings me to this issue that, I mean, there's a lot of grammar. I'm not a culture expert, but I picked up something recently that Kamala Harris said, that culture, it is a reflection of our moments in our time. A reflection of our moment in our time. And I said to myself, the Westerners, they can say that culture is a reflection because they've been allowed to develop on their own terms. For us as Africans, can we say the same thing too? That culture is a reflection of our time? Because if we dance to that music, there's no chance for us to really incorporate IKS, for it to even change our lives, because our colonial experience has changed things for us. So let's take our music, for example, where it is, which is basically intercultural. Our art music is a derivative of the Western culture. And a lot of scholars are saying that is the status quo. Our culture is a reflection of who we are. We were colonized. So our music, in fact, we can take ownership for a lot of things that belong to the West. That is who we are. And buying into this theory of culture is a reflection of who we are. So aren't we meant to confront these things? There's something that happened to the likes of Yuba Uzogwe when they went to the field. There was something that snapped in them that, look, we can't continue to write music this way. Then they started going into indigenous knowledge systems. But they're only the few people that we can think of. That idea, that philosophy has not gained traction. Rather, what is happening is we are who we are by virtue of our colonial experience. And we are not nanny anything. And we have been saying this thing for 20 years. So is it okay Yeah, but for us to just throw our hands in the air and because frankly speaking, I mean, I'm sounding like a broken record when I discuss this with a lot of people. When they say, "Shut up! You want us to go back to African systems? You want us to go back to as if we didn't have any form of civilization?" So thinking about it, sir, have we reached the end of the road? And now the people like Ayorinde, they're talking about Afropolitanism. Yeah, they're saying, okay, let's let's even be Africans outside there when we have not even imbibed a lot of IKS. Let us be Africans in China. Let us be Africans in America. Isn't it disturbing? Isn't this disturbing that we don't value, and we still have loads of gold mine untapped, and then we can't just get our acts together. And beyond music is affecting us in terms of governance, clamoring for democracy that is failing all over the world, and we're pretending as if we're elitist. So how, I don't know, is it a lost cause? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Olunroti. I can relate with this kind of frustration. I mean, it's like, I'm not even sure there's any time we have any conversation that is reached this way that you don't go back to the same point. But for me, I am optimistic. I cannot afford to be despondent. I've resolved for myself. And that's why, how do we preach the gospel to begin to disciple people? We cannot effect change until we have a sizable number and building a critical mass. That is when that change can come. Not that each of us are acting in silos and we expect that the change will come. I spoke about different stakeholders. So it's not something that will happen without a common purpose. There must be that synergy from trying to even instill what we are talking about at the smallest level, at primary school level. We spoke about how many of us speak our local languages to our children at home. I think, so let's also forget that it's not just music. People in language, people in other fields are also complaining that we seem to have lost these values. And, and it's as if we are becoming deformed. In fact, we are deformed because we failed to conform. We cannot be like the Europeans we are aspiring to be. And we are also completely cut off from our own roots. So who are we? The problem of identity crisis is there. I quite understand. But we cannot just we cannot just throw in the towel. The status quo can change when each of us decide, to begin to put into practice those little things. And we hope once you have those gains, you celebrate it, and then you can move on to the other one. But when we have aversion, we completely resent that which belongs to us. I'm sorry, this cannot happen. So, and that's why that takes me back to the issue of, I spoke about the issue of curriculum revision. I also may be as passionate in ensuring that this change comes. But the other time I remember my comment was that we are far from whatever. Somebody said we have the potential, we have all of this. I am not doubting that we have them. But the question is, it is when you are called into the room, you are called to the table, that you can say, these are my ideas. They know exactly the kind of ballroom politics that has to be played. And so when you bring in somebody who is who drinks, who breathes anything, every fiber of his being is just pro-West and anti-Africa and the person is the expert to come and talk about the revision of your curriculum, there goes the whole ball. It's gone until we have another opportunity. So we will keep having this conversation. And the same thing, is it not, what other area are we talking about? The political setting. You spoke about we embracing the Western, American form of democracy, or whatever that means. People even talk of homegrown democracy, as if democratic values are strange to us. Oh, critically, if you reflect, even within the setting of the monarchy, its power is not absolute. You look at the Oyo Empire, Alaafin, yes, it's called Ikubabayeye, whatever it says is absolute. But also don't forget that the Oyomesi could send an empty calabash to him saying, we reject your rulership, we reject, if you become a tyrant, they could reject some kind of leadership. So you have check and balances. What else could be more democratic? Whoever becomes the king is not imposed. There are people who can contest for this too, but the Ifa will play its own role, which will be advisory, but the kingmakers will still have their way, either by voice vote, either by unanimous decision, or by split vote. That is democracy in action. And then you talk about the judicial arm of government. It's late where you have the Ogbonis there. The judicial execution of condemned criminals are done during Oro Festival. So what else, if you look clearly into the fiber of the IKS, the Igbo is not going to teach us what democracy is. Just like Dr. Kayode had also said, we've always have all of these things. They've been part of us, but we need to raise this conversation to the point where you and I will have to light, the candle. And I take it as a point of duty for my students. They will know, if any of them is online now, they will know I've taken it as a personal, evangelism. The issue of IKS is so on the front burner for me. I'm passionate about it. I teach it and I encourage them, but I cannot impose because the system does not allow me to impose my will on them. At the end of the day, they will still do whatever they want to do, but I'll let them realize and appreciate values that are embedded there. So I think please don't be despondent. We cannot afford to give up. We need to continue to have this conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Oluranti.
Thank you so much for the question, Dr. Oluranti, and also our speaker for today. Okay, I think we have Mr. Kolawole. I don't know if that's Mr. Gani Kale, I don't know, but Mr. Kolawole, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question while we wait for.
Yeah, that's me, Kolawole Gani Kale. Yes. Dr. Kayode Samuel Agbaonitolorile. Thank you very much. And Dr. Ayorinde, I really, I've always identified with you. Actually, I had to abandon a class to be able to join this discussion 30 minutes late. But I'm happy that I'm able to grasp most of the ideas that you have presented, and this is fantastic. I'm really happy. Now, I have I've had this discussion with colleagues all over the places, even in master classes and conferences, and I had some recommendations that I made that I would like to share here. I think what you have expressed so far about IKS, I like the acronym anyway, the term, is more or less, it remains a challenge to academia in our domain in Nigeria. And that is the challenge that I think we have not been able to face squarely. Now, I have asked myself about some question in the past in terms of notation, which you very well addressed. I've always asked myself, why must we notate African music according to Western standards? I'm like, why can't we define and share our artistic expressions in ways that reflects our own traditions and showcase our uniqueness? And are we compromising our heritage in the global arts and cultural landscape by conforming to external norms? You know? And then talking about that, I'll say, how do we now teach our students to overcome the marginalization of the diverse cultural expression of African music in favor of Western music paradigms within the most natural curricula and syllabi? I mean, I think we must implement strategies to develop a more inclusive and representative pedagogy that values our traditional music alongside Western paradigms that foster a deeper understanding and appreciation of the diverse cultural expression that enriches the global musical landscape. So, part of the recommendation that I'm thinking of, I know that most of our institutions must have implemented some of these, but to what degree, to what extent? I think we need to ensure that our curriculum includes a wide range of African musical genres and traditions, such as high life, awurebe, Afrobeat, makossa, juju, kwaito, all sorts of traditional music from various regions of Nigeria. And we need to teach the historical and cultural context of African music, including the social, the political, and the economic factors that have reshaped it. We need to develop or use textbooks and educational resources that focus on African music. We need to collaborate with African music scholars to create authentic materials. I mean, Dr. Laurent is there. Your very self is there. Dr. Kayode Samuel. You know, in terms of the notation that I mentioned, we need to teach students about African notation system and methods of music transmission in addition to Western notation. We need to figure out these things. We need to put heads together. We need to come together and, you know, not just talking about it. We need to take decisive action and come up with something. And there are a lot of possibilities that if we don't come together and really brainstorm together and agree on the way forward, it doesn't mean that we are going to wave a magic wand and come up with solution. This thing will take time, because we have neglected our heritage in our curricula for too long, as you have rightly addressed as well. So I believe we need to incorporate political music making activities and practical music making activities as well, such as drumming, singing, and dancing and playing traditional instruments, which all of us music students must have experienced in our universities when we were students. But to what extent? What have we given priority to alongside other Western musical ideologies that was imbibed into us? So we need to start in our universities to invite local musicians and elders and practitioners of African music to conduct workshop and masterclass. Let's stop calling them unlettered. They might be unlettered, but they have the kind of knowledge that we can only dream of having, even with all our qualifications and our degrees. We need to respect these entities, not only going out to learn from them. We need to bring them in academia. I believe I have mentioned this in some our past discourse on this platform as well. And then we need to use recording. We need to use videos, documentaries, etc., to expose students to a variety of African musical styles. And we need to utilize music softwares and online platforms that feature African music and allow for interactive learning. If we, in the process of featuring this stuff, we will also discover what we can do to improve on this. And that will be a good beginning for what we're advocating right now. Then we need to provide training for teachers on African music tradition and cultural competency to ensure that they can effectively teach and appreciate these traditions. We have to organize professional development workshops and seminars with experts in African music, and we have them. It's just that our priority is not rightly placed at the moment. We are still very much, imbibed, we're very much soaked into this Western domination of our own cultural heritage. So we need to foster partnerships with local artists, with musicians and cultural organizations to bring authentic experience into the classroom, to encourage collaborative projects between schools and African cultural institutions. Okay, so we have to advocate for the inclusion of African music in our national education standards and curricula. We need to work with policymakers, in the educational policies, to recognize the importance of African cultural expression in education and bring it to the forefront of our pedagogy in our institutions. So we need to promote research on African music within academic institutions to provide a strong foundation for educational content. Support publications and conferences that focus on African music education. We need to make this our priority beyond every other things that we have been feeding our students with. We organize school events. Of course, I know a lot of institutions have been doing that. We organize music festival, cultural days, and concert that celebrates African music, even in our universities. To involve the local communities in this event as well, to foster a broader appreciation and understanding of African music. So I am saying we should establish music clubs and performance groups that is dedicated solely to African music and arrange field trips and cultural sites. To cultural sites, to museums, to live performances of most of our African festivals that just come and go like that without any academic record being taken. All these performances that feature authentic African music in our villages. We need to get our students to know when these things are happening and get our students out for ethnographic experience in these events. And we need to integrate this into our curricula. So let us involve our students in planning the execution of music programs to ensure their interests and cultural backgrounds are represented.
Wow,
so, yeah, well, these are just a few of what I think that we have not been doing that we really need to be doing.
Thank you very much, Mangani. Yeah. Actually, your recommendations are perfectly in order. And if I must just ask, how do we action some of these things? Baby steps. What is prescribed in our curriculum is known as the minimum standard. Minimum. And so that's the starting point for me. Since it's the minimum, they have not put a seal on it. They did not put a seal to say, if you do, so it means I can add to it. And it is in that point that so it's about how you are able to creatively interpret what is in the curriculum. I teach what is there, but then I also teach the components that I know are essential. That's one. Two, let me also talk about fueling and encouraging or building the capacity of our alumni economy. And what do I mean by this? Occasionally we are privileged, but it's not all the time, to have colleagues, professional colleagues, who might actually hold strategic political positions. This is where professional association will have to, do more, because if we're able to work with them, synergize with them as critical stakeholders, then we can get to influence some of the changes that we are clamoring for. And I will use this particular example. Just shortly, maybe I think 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were driving, and one particular colleague of hers, who now occupies a very central, who was a political position, I think, a chairman of a particular agency, that could influence and bring in more nutritionists. And the person said, this is my agenda. While I'm here, I am going to ensure that we employ nothing less than 40 nutritionists to occupy, those spaces that have always been there. He chose that to be his agenda. Let him play his own role there. Let him do whatever he has to do. That little, it will germinate. So we don't need to sit back and just, fold our hands and think we cannot do. I think we can achieve all of these things, but it requires a willpower. And that's why I spoke about a mindset that must be transformed. The transformation must start from the mindset that, number one, this is possible, and we will be unrelenting in ensuring that we do all of that. So I thank you also, that we're all on the same page. Please permit me to share one other, for the risk of sounding or blowing my own trumpet. When I had the opportunity to get to achieve a status in College of Education, to now be in a position to influence what the promotion criteria could be, I was able to convince the powers that be that issue of performance should form, part of elements that people could present for their promotion. And I argued it critically. At that time, I was able to convince the provost, I didn't need this promotion, so don't think I'm fighting for myself. And by the grace of God, I had what it takes to climb the ladder. So it's not really about me. It's about you understanding the value of what it takes to put together music concert. You just sit down there, you enjoy it, you clap, you think it's like, I said, look, it's serious work. So when I itemized all of this, points to him, he became convinced, but he said, now, show me how your own performance is different from that of Sunny Ade, why your people now can use it for promotion. So we now have to sit down to carve out what are the standards, how do you judge all of these things, but let people benefit from it. So let's just, each of us in our little corner, let's play our own role, let's shine the lights, let's do the little we can. I'm sure the light will become brighter as time goes on. Thank you very much once again for those powerful recommendations. I think that those are the ways.
Thank you so much. Of course, Mr. Kolawole Ganikale is a common phenomenon on this platform, and we thank him for his commitment. And also, like many of us, thank you so much for your commitment. And thanks so much for answering that question. And also, Mr. Kola, thanks for your for those outline. I think that's in itself, it's a lecture, I think, which we need to have. I think that's a lecture in itself, which is very important. But we have DBO. Before DBO, I just want to say something because I don't want to forget some of the things Mr. Gani Kolawole said, and also the response from our guest speaker today. One, I find it very interesting when you mention, what feed, that metaphor, what we feed is very important. That metaphor, I like it that you use. What we feed them is what, Then the point is, we're talking about indigenous knowledge system, indigenous this and that and that, and how it can shape, but to start from local Nigerian context, the question that I keep asking people is that, okay, we in the academia, we speak, we want to, there's a tendency of activism in us, like what we are doing today is part of advocating for something, which is a norm, of course. But the question is, how are we doing it? What are the pedagogues? And how our processes and premises, are they actually fitting? And is there any connection between our processes, our practical actions, and premises with the kind of advocacy we are making? I'm going to give an example. If, for instance, I am a scholar somewhere and I have access to, let's say, 20 students in my grad class, grad seminar, or I'm teaching about 30 undergraduate students, and I really want them to do African stuff and whatever. The question is, how many of previously published content regarding African indigenous system that we have available are these students reading? Are they part of my, article allocation, in terms of what I allocate for them to read for class? Are they part of my syllabus? Are they part of my curriculum? I think that's where I think we should start from. Many people talking about IKS. Ask them, how many Akiuba do they have in their syllabus? How many Nzewi do they have in their syllabus? How many of Dr. Kayode Samuel article? I think I know of 3 right now. One on the female gender, and one on the indigenous the communication, and there's another one again. 3 that I can speak of right now. How many of these articles have found their way in the content that we feed students, to use that your metaphor again? So I think that's the beginning. The reading culture is also important in shaping this advocacy. We need to also teach them how to read. And it's in that process of creating syllabus, creating curriculum, teaching them. These are the materials, and I'm happy you spoke about 30% minimum standard. Can we also draw indigenous articles? Let them, because it starts from what they are feeding, what they are reading. That will then propel them into, oh, I want to work on indigenous drum. I want to work on indigenous this. I want to work on indigenous that. I think because many of us here, and I've heard on this same platform in education, I've heard people saying, it is after I read so that I pick interest in 1, 2, 3, 4. I've heard that on this same platform. So I think reading is very, very important. Then the question is, what is our syllabus like? What are the articles we are giving to students to read? So this is just things I want to say. And lastly, on this same platform, one of us, particularly, thank God, Dr. Olorunti is here today. He has once accused us in one way or the other, while also making this advocacy that it is only Africans that go to the global market empty-handed. The question is, those who are not well fed cannot go to the global space to contribute something unique. They will always go there and repropagate whatever they've seen that coming from somewhere. So the question is, that feeding, that's a big metaphor, sir. Thanks for using it. So we need to go back to the archive. What has been published? Who are the scholars around? We need to gather their material and create syllabus. Let's start reading these people. Thank you so much. Divio, can we have you, sir?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear you?
Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. K.
Yes,
good afternoon.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I came late. I've been in a meeting for over 2 hours, but I said you must not leave for a very interesting topic. And thanks for the little part very interesting. Thank you so much for the opportunity to listen to you, Shigoni. Now, I just want to advance the submission of Egbon organically. I listened to him carefully, as usual, very passionate about what he's saying, and very interesting submission. But he said something. He said something that we in our universities. And I begin to wonder. You see, the Yorubas will say, Yoruba ni amukun eru ewo. Only okele nwo ewo sale. It is not about the university. No, this thing the issues has been that we've missed the steps. In actual fact, in my own opinion, as a university lecturer, I think kudos should be given to the university for sustaining this thing. You see, the education at the lower level, particularly when it comes to IKS, it's almost crumbled. I must be very sincere to you. Look at the age bracket of those of us on this platform. Look at the age bracket. You won't see any of this youth there because they do not even know. They don't understand what we are saying. I have so many of my students that came in contact with to do drums for the first time in the university. The day we bought a xylophone in Gedegu, and some of them came to my office, they ran out, they said, doctor, what is this? So how do you tackle that? So it is, we've been able to do a lot of things just to put them in line, but you see, we have to go back. The policymakers are actually missing it. Their knowledge of what is music what is music should be readdressed. Because if you come to Lagos, they say CDS, there's a name they call music in CDS, there's a name, and I find it difficult to talk about culture without talking about language, because language is like a conveyor belt. How many of our students could even express himself impeccably in their native language? The last time, some times ago, when NUC visited us, I believe Dr. Luranti is still there, and they were searching through our books. The only question they asked our department was when they called the 400 level and they saw their project, and they said, why is any one of them not writing about African music? I remember the question we asked them, do they even speak African language? So if you don't speak African language, how will you express yourself? How will you be an African musicologist? So those are the issues. We're looking at it from the university, attend organized seminars, organize all those things. Yes, it is about what are we bringing to the university. It's a passionate appeal to our policymakers. I'm glad, I think history has been restored. Yoruba is gasping for breath. 2-3 days ago, I saw a collection of pictures of people studying Yoruba language, I think in the US, University of Tennessee or somewhere, that they were all white. The question is, if the white people are studying our language, that means something is there that we don't know. So those are the issues. I'm not a pessimist. Like Dr. K said we should be optimistic that it will be well. But we should look at this in all encompassing, only. And so we have to go back on that. 90% of those of us speak on this platform as I speak will express themselves in their language, understand what it is, know the ethics, know the language, know the values, know everything. And another thing I want to say is that they said, Awaloma Ashawalaruge. Dr. Kayode said it. They condemned our own forms of governance, traditional governance. They said democracy is one man, one vote. They said because some people will sit at the palace and after whatever they dictate to the people. But now the question is, what is electoral college? The United States of America is the home of democracy. They go all around the 50 states of the nation, campaign and everything, and there's still electoral college. The simple translation of that is that one man in America is not equal to one vote. And our own has been condemned back home. So we look at this thing. Usually we are involved. We start from one, but our policymakers must go to the local, to the primary institutions, primary, secondary, and restore glory into our culture. It is not the university. We start from the university. Just these 2-3 weeks ago, our students in Logan House who did the stage, very beautiful dance drama. The Oba will stand up to. So those are the issues. It's a very serious problem. We talk at this stage, but so many people are not corroborating our ideas, our submission. So let me stop that. Let me stop and say thank you to Dr. Kayode once more.
All right, thank you very much for your thoughts. I agree with you that we need to also go deep down. But for me, why I chose higher institution is, it's not just, I'm not focusing only on the university. From my profile, I had schooling in Polytechnic. I was privileged to teach in College of Education for close to 17 years before I now moved to the university. So I understand that it's the colleges of education products that are supposed to lay the foundation for the music education in schools. So if you don't get them, there's nothing, if they don't have what they are supposed to use, there's nothing to sell to the children. So for me, that's why they are also an important component of in the discussion. So yes, we need to do more. It just occurred to me also when Dr. Ayo was speaking, when you are talking about what kind of materials we give to students, I'm happy that at least what I can see in the Department of Music in UI is quite heartwarming for me. And the likes of Dr. Samuel Adeju, Samuel
I just said.
I just said, and Adejube, they are trying to change the narrative there, because now, I've had occasion to watch them, and part of their classes, and I see that what we are talking about here, this particular issue that you are discussing, is on the front burner for them. Engaging the students under the course sociology of music, engrafting them into the both indigenous and popular music. So exposing them adequately. So it's not really about music of other cultures. It's about trying to drive this thing home. Yeah. And, the more we do all of these things, I think eventually things will get better. I just remember, and I felt I needed to chip that. So there are good sounds. There might not be many, yes, but we should also acknowledge where we get it right and encourage people to do more in that area. So I think I needed to just call attention to that and give credit to them for. Please help me to encourage them to keep up the good work.
Thank you so much, Dr. K. Thank you. And thanks for all our colleagues, friends who are still with us, who some of you, you encourage us also, for your commitment and consistency, for that matter, on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Thank you so much. Yeah. Again, for some of us who are joining us newly, I know some people are coming in newly. This is Organhouse Concert and Seminar Series. What we do here is exactly what we are discussing today. It is about mediation. What is mediation? Advocacy. What is advocacy? Pushing, fighting for a cause. Our focus, our business, our ideas are premised on the notion that Nigeria can also transform through knowledge, through music education. And Nigerian scholars can also compete globally with what we produce in Nigeria, not only what we've read from elsewhere or what we do from elsewhere. So please join us on this train, join us on this track as we continue this seminar, this conversation, this initiative on a weekly basis, monthly basis, yearly basis, and for as much as how long that God will permit us to do it. So again, thanks so much for our guest today. I really, this is a sober moment. This is a reflexive moment for all of us. And thanks so much, as Dr. Oloranti puts it in that metaphorical way. This is Bangkongbi. Yeah, it's indeed Bangkongbi. Yeah, there's a lot. It's packed with ideas, nuances that some of us need to go back to this recording to actually sit again and listen to how the ways in which Dr. Kayode, detailed, explores all these materials today. Again, my own takeaway again today is the fact that indigenous knowledge system is not belated. It's not a belated reality. What is belated reality? That we think, indigenous, it is pre-colonial culture. No, they are not pre-colonial culture. They are still here with us today. Again, just a quick anecdote or perhaps a sample. In Brazil, recently, I saw a particular social media feed. Somebody, doing the Yoruba Ifa, incantation, process on digital, something like an iPad. It was consulting on an iPad. And somebody was asking me, is this real? And I told the person, the iPad is a technology. What is technology? On this platform, Tunde Adegbola has explained to us, it is not an end. Technology is actually created to enhance culture, to enhance our productivity. So it is a word that is spoken, that is embedded, the ideas into the iPad, that is what the iPad is responding to. And the young man was consulting. In the same way, formerly, people need to go to a prophet physically to lead down to pray. But right now, somebody in the US can call a pastor in Nigeria, and say, Pastor, pray for me. And the pastor will pray. The person in the US will be healed. We have seen a sample. So this is more like what Dr. Kayode has explored today in a different way and a unique way, that indigenous system is not primitive. It is not an antiquated reality. We can also start using technology. We have, he spoke about theory. We can encode theory, and we have technological guys around. So I'm just trying to open it up again for some of us to see what the implication of this particular presentation today. Again, thanks so much, Dr. Kayode. I think we have one question before we round up today. Dr. Oluranti, is that a follow-up? Can we have you, please?
I'm just kind of confused. I mean, you said something twice, and I'm not sure whether I got that too from Prof's delivery, that this issue of IKS is not pre-colonial. And I don't know whether I don't get the context well, and I want clarity on that.
Can I quickly say that so you can continue? Can I quickly say what I mean? IKS means Indigenous Knowledge System. By indigenous, it is, of course, it is long-standing in our history, both from 13, 14, as much as centuries ago. But that material itself is not the practice, the manifestation, and how to engage it is not limited to 1890s. What happened in the 1890s are still very much around. Those culture, those knowledge are still much around with us today. It is us that are not using it. Ọlọ́run ṣì ń bẹ bí tàtijọ́, àwa la ò pé bàbá, àwa la ò san Ọlọ́run bí tàtijọ́. That's what I'm saying. That these materials are still much available today. The talking drum, the batas, they still speak. They spoke in the 19th, 16th century. The same bata that was played then, that manifested, are still very much in Iragbiji or your Ibadan, different places today. The question is, what I'm saying is that we can still go back to this material and also now use technology to further enhance their productivity. I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's what I'm.
Okay, if I may ask, I mean, from what you just said now, then how can we use technology to harness? I mean, is it to recontextualize, or I don't understand how do we engage that now? I mean, how do we bring technology, for example, into that space?
Well, that's a question. Most of the things Dr. K has explored today. The question is, the materials are there. What is technology? It's ability to harness. It's a means to an end. It's a tool. It's a resource to get this material ongoing. People don't, for instance, language. People hardly speak Yoruba or indigenous. Everybody speaks English grammar in their house, as Dr. K explained today. But the question is, in other cultures, in Asia, for instance, particularly South Asia or East Asia, we have seen how the Japanese, or the Chinese, for instance, revived their indigenous musical instrument. Today, we have a purely Chinese indigenous orchestra. Today, we have purely Chinese knowledge system that are accessible. In fact, there are many phones today that if you are, well, I am very, in Germany, for instance, for me to communicate sometimes ago with friends, I need to speak to the phone, and the phone will translate what I say to them in English. Then they will say the same thing to the phone will translate back, then they'll play it for me. So that's what I mean. That language is there, it's not dead. So technology is just a mediation. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a mediation in the sense that it helps us continue and propagate that culture. That's what I mean.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, so as I was saying, thank you so much for everyone. Thanks for coming today. Thank you, and thank you again. So next week, we are going to build on this conversation. Of course, the conversation continues. It's not always a close-ended conversation. Yeah, we are always on with this engagement. So please follow us on our YouTube page. I am going to paste the link again for you to see. So the links are there. Kindly follow us. And also, this particular presentation is going to be, uploaded on next week on our YouTube page, thanks to our technical teams. Then also, most initial presentations are also there. So again, I didn't say this at the beginning. This is very important in closing. The YouTube page serves many purposes. One of them is archiving. The second is generating resources for some of the things Dr. K explored today. Initially, we don't have a pool, we don't have a space, technical space where we can go that is so accessible to everyone to a next conversation like this. Initially, for us to hear Dr. K, we need to either photocopy his article, or we need to travel to Ibadan, African Studies, to go and book appointment to see him, or subscribe to his courses at Institute of African Studies. But right now, because of technology, we are able to engage him. This is one of the essence for the page and what we are doing today. It doubles as documentation, engagement, and also shifting the boundaries of knowledge and allowing a free space, critical space for scholarly engagement from our own perspective. Thank you so much. So next week, we will expect you again. We are looking forward to see you next week. And again, the conversation continues. In closing, Dr. K, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate you today. Thank you.